Back in time, BassMaster magazine, we're in July, August 1976, and I always get embarrassed when I don't find anything to talk about. I kind of was, this is the second one, which I didn't really find anything I found of interest. And what I realized a little bit of is that this is the same time in my career where I started separating theory and reality. Okay, theory did not interest me. All I wanted to see was reality. Because theory might have some good ideas. There's a lot of outdoor riders riding, but most of them are riding with very little time on the water. And so that's basically ended up being somebody else's theory about fishing. And some of it was accurate, but so much of it was not. And so this really was that time frame when I wouldn't even read articles if I didn't recognize the writer and who he was writing about, because that's not worth it. That's not worth my time. I got to find reality. And really where the reality existed was in the tournaments themselves. So that's where my interest really switched over. The next one here is September, October 1976. And this one really didn't have a lot in it in that respect, but it had one powerful article in it that even now when I go back to it, all of us fishermen were products of those that came before us. And yeah, I've mentioned over and over Tommy Martin, Elroy Kruger, that I actually was products of them. There's two anglers that I haven't mentioned, and really I was as much a product of them as I was Elroy and Tommy. And the strange connection between them all was the spinnerbait. And I know y'all, this one here, which really had a huge influence on me, and I really didn't think much about it at the time, I know better now, was this kid here that you all will recognize, and that was Jimmy Houston. He won this tournament in 1976 on Santee Cooper. And that's really when I started paying a little bit of attention to him, because he was throwing a spinnerbait. He was standing. The other person, him and Ricky Green were real close friends, and I don't know who to give complete credit for the standing part, but he was standing. But one thing that Jimmy was doing that nobody else at that time was doing was underhand cast. Everybody was overhand casting. And Jimmy was the first one I ever saw. And immediately that caught my eye, because you see the color of this water. That's the one thing Elroy and Tommy and all of us spinnerbait fishermen always kind of looked for. We didn't look for clear water. We looked for water that had color to it. And when your water has color to it, you're not making long casts. Clear water, you're making long casts because this fish is using sight, and you don't want to spook him. If you go out Lake Mead, Lake Powell, you want to make as long a cast as you can, because fish, you can see 20 foot deep and you know they can see. So off-color water was one thing, but then when I read this article, I just did. I don't even remember I did back then. But he talks about how many casts a minute he was making. I thought I was the only one that ever brought that up when I won the Classic in 1990. This is 1976. And he was talking with the underhand cast, he can make between 4 and 8 casts a minute. Okay, I was timed in the 1990 Classic at 7.5 casts a minute most of the day. And it just totally blew me away. I never even thought about it, and I guess that shows I did not read this article that well. But how he was doing that in off-color water, you're not throwing very far. You're just throwing near the target. He's making underhand casts. He doesn't even have the raised motion, which wastes 2 seconds, about 1 to 2 seconds, over an underhand cast where he's just, doing that figure 8 flip underneath and making a tremendous amount of cast. Jimmy, unlike Elroy and me and Tommy, he pretty well preferred a single blade on his spinnerbaits, where we had tandem blades, and now I still do. 99% of the time I'm fishing a tandem blade. Where Jimmy, he called it a red man spinnerbait. Jimmy is from Talcott, Oklahoma. His wife is Cherokee, and I guess that's where he got red man from. But so this article, I just kind of really reread it, and it fascinates me, because this is what became a dominant style, and it's still one of my dominant styles. of fishing is throwing spinnerbaits with the underhand cast. So it's and the one thing I never could figure out about Jimmy was I figured he wouldn't live very long because he never wore a hat. And I figured sooner or later he's got to get sunstroke, you know, because we were fishing a lot of hot weather tournaments. And you see his blonde hair, but he never wore a hat. As long as I was around him, and he would get up in the dangest water that you didn't even think a fish would live in, casting in the middle of stumps. And he was a master. His favorite spinnerbait was, he called it a 1/4 ounce, but it was really a 1/2 ounce. And he used a number 5 Colorado blade, hammered blade. And that was the bait he threw pretty much 90% of the time. But if you have this article, you really ought to go back and revisit it because it's a tremendous amount of reality of how to fish a spinnerbait and why. It's a great article. This gentleman won our Bugs Island tournament, and this was the tournament where I fished, and I'm pretty sure I drew Fred Young in this particular event that made the original Big O's. At the same time, you know, there's guys all over Tennessee, Arkansas, Virginia that were hand carving their own Big O's, which would look like this Bagley. Jim Bagley was the first one to come out with a mass manufactured wood bait. And he came out with crankbaits. And I started fishing them. And I started having a lot of success with them. Even I couldn't get hand carved baits when I need them. And didn't have very many of them. I had 2 that Fred Young gave me. And then I didn't have access. Billy and Bobby Murray had access to some guy on Ouachita, Lake Ouachita in Arkansas. And he made them out of cedar. These were all made out of balsa wood. But I fell in love with wood carved crankbaits. Still do. I'm not going to go into this a lot, but this played a big role, at least psychologically, in my win, which was at the end of this year. We won't see the report until we go into the 1977, because Ray was always about 3 months behind getting them in his magazine. But the CB radio, they put them in our boats, and that classic was the first time we ever saw a CB. And our riders were supposed to report every catch. You know, Ray was always trying to come up with something. And so this article was about that happening. And it, like I said, it played a big psychological role in that tournament. And that was, at the end of this year, 1976, on Lake Guntersville, was the Bassmaster Classic. That's the other thing I'm starting to notice in all this, is I almost didn't make that classic. And that's the classic that saved my life in fishing. I mean, here I can show you, where my standings were, and I'm not even in the top 20. He only took 24. Okay, I'm not even in the top 24 here. And in the previous magazine, I showed myself down here at 46th place. And so I had a lot to recover to get in. I'm not sure if this is the Bugs Island tournament that this gentleman, Jim Hawkins, won. And I don't know that I was even in the top 50 here. And I don't see my name, so I must not have been. But so I didn't really, And I think, and I'm just guessing, but I think we only have 1 or 2 tournaments left for me to qualify for the Classic. So this is getting down to, I know I had to be about, very nervous because that tournament was the most important tournament in my career, and I was already flat broke. And that was going to be my last chance, I felt, to recover. So anyway, this is not a lot of information, but you'll see I'm going to get more personal about this, what information I pull out of these, because it was the information that played a huge role in my career. And again, you'll see more and more of me pulling stuff from the tournaments that I call reality versus theory. September, October 1976.